Wow, hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in. And once again, I appreciate you guys being here, making the time uh, to see these presentations. I appreciate you guys for that. Today, guys, we're going to go back like the old days and do an in depth investigation on the history, so called legend, so called myths or mythology of Brutus, the founder of Britain, right? His connection to Troy and the Trojans, and their connection again to Darda or Dardanus, who is of the line of Zarah, a son of Judah. And that's what we're going to get into today, right away. I hope you guys enjoy this presentation. Grab some popcorn, get the notebook ready for the notes, and please save your opinions until the end of the presentation. All right, watch the whole video before giving opinions. Again, thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and get started. So real quick, I just want to make a point right away. I tell you this all the time. We've been learning about it in the series Researches into the Lost Histories of America. When we're talking about that, a lot of these mythical deities or mythological people are actually based on real people, real history. All right. In this book, Stories of Gods and Heroes by Thomas Bulfinch, go to chapter 35 of this book. It says Origin of Mythology, Statues of Gods and Goddesses, Poets of Mythology. Origin of Mythology, just real quick. Having reached the close of our series of stories of pagan mythology, an inquiry suggests itself. Whence came these stories? Have they a foundation in truth, or are they simply dreams of the imagination? Philosophers have suggested various theories on the subject. And number one, the scriptural theory, all right, that is coming from scripture. All this mythology, listen, according to which all mythological legends are derived from the narratives of scripture, though the real facts have been disguised and altered. All right, we're talking about them creating deities out of biblical characters, real people. Thus, Deucalion is only another name for Noah, Hercules for Samson. All right, we got this drop already, right? Look, Deucalion is Noah, Hercules is Samson, Arian for Jonah, etc. Sir Walter Raleigh in his History of the World says Jubal, Tubal, and Tubal Cain were Mercury. Uh-oh, is it Mercury Thoth? Tubal Cain from the line of Cain? Huh? Vulcan and Apollo, inventors of pasturage, smithing, and music. The dragon which kept the golden apples was the serpent that beguiled the Eve. Nimrod's tower was the temple of the giants against heaven. There are doubtless many curious coincidences like these, but the theory cannot without extravagance be pushed so far as to account for any great proportion of the stories. So basically what he's saying is, many historians, philosophers already said, hey, this is things I tell you. I hope you guys are understanding that a lot of these mythological characters, these stories, as we saw, dealing with real people or real geographies, and a lot of that happening in America or these people coming out of America. All right. So again, a lot of myth is based on real people. All right. We got that clear, right? So again, we have shown that in many times, these mythical characters were real people. They became, deities. They started doing ancestor worship with them, and now they became gods or part of mythology. But we're going to talk about today a specific person, right? We're in the Encyclopedia Britannica or Dictionary of Arts, Sciences, and General Literature, 8th edition. Again, volume 8. This is from 1854. 1854. So we go all the way to page 655 and we read a little bit about Dardanus. Okay, remember, we're just talking about a lot of these mythical characters were real people. So it says here, the mythical ancestor of the Trojans. Dardanus, huh? The mythical ancestor of the Trojans was the son of Jupiter and Electra. All right, that's the Hajj. We're going to break that down again today, what they mean about that. Remember, a lot of the times they're just adding, creating these names, but these names mean somebody else too. So Dardanus, I'm going to show you who really he was. So again, according to the Greek legend, he came from Arcadia to Samohamsi, and thence removed to Phrygia, where he established the famous Palladium, originally the dowry of his wife Chrysi, which was afterwards enshrined at Troy. Dardanus afterwards married Bateia, the daughter of Teucrus, and by her became the father of Erictonius and Idaea. According to the later tradition, he was the son of Coritus, an Etruscan prince, and emigrated from Etruria through Phrygia. All right, see how they be changing the parents and stuff. It says Dardanus, Dardanum, or Dardania. Dardania, who's the Dardanians? In ancient geography, a city of the Troad in Mysia, taking its name from Dardanus, the founder of the dynasty of Troy, okay? It was a small, unimportant town, even during the authentic period of ancient history, and is chiefly memorable as the spot where Sulla and Mithridates met in BC 84 to arrange the terms of peace. All right, so when we Google Dardanus, this is kind of like what we get about Dardanus. We don't get what's his origin, other than, oh, those are his parents. Okay, where are they from? These are all supposed to just be mythical characters, not real people in Greek mythology. But again, we've already broken this down in numerous videos. We just read that book just now, saying, hey, a lot of these people in mythology are real people. A lot of them are being grabbed from scripture and things like that. All right, so remember that. Right now we know we're going to be talking about a descendant of Dardanus, right, or Darda. All right, remember Dardanus is supposed to be the founder of Troy. But who is Dardanus really? So real quick, again, just to recap, we're going to go read a Bible verse. I'm going to show you who Dardanus or Darda is in the Bible. Okay? So before we start, I'm going to go real quick to 1 Chronicles 2:6 in the Bible, right? And we're going to talk about the sons of Zarah or Sarah. Remember, that is the twin of Perez. These are 2 sons of Judah from Tamara. Today we're going to be talking about the lines of Zarah, just to add more corroboration. Again, the sons of Zarah are Simri, Ethan, Heman, Calco or Calcos with a C, and Darda, who is Dardanus. We're going to see that. Okay, so again, these are royal lines of Judah. All right. In 1 Kings 4:31, they're saying that Solomon right here was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezraite, wiser than Heman, Calco, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. So these are the sons of Mahol, who's a son of Sarah, a son of Judah. All right, so a son of Judah, right? Darda, right? A son of Judah, or of the line of Judah, on the line of Sarah, Darda, huh? Then we got Dardanians, Dardanians. So a descendant of Darda, what do you think they would call him, guys? They would call them Dardanians, right? But historically, the Dardanians are the Trojans, from Troy. Let's just read real quick. It says the Dardanoi. Its anglicized modern terms being Dardanians or Dardans, were a legendary people of Troy, right? Ancient Troy. The Dardanoi were the descendants of Dardanus, the mythical founder of Dardanus, okay? An ancient city in the Troad. A contingent of Dardanians figures among Troy's allies in the Trojan War. So Darda was, remember, biblical character. Who are the Dardanians? Supposed to be from Dardanus. Dardanus is supposed to be a son of Zeus, who founded Dardanus, right? Dardanus. The city, ethnic, or appellation of a person from Dardanus. Darda is Dardanus. Its coin legends are Dar and Darda, right? Darda. So again, guys, Dardanus is the supposed mythical founder of Dardanus, the ancient city of Troy. literally the founder of Troy, okay? Dardanians or Dardanoi are descendants of Dardanos or Darda. Darda, right? But remember, Dardanos, right? You see a different version, Dardanos, right? Remember that. And we got Darda, right? Again, Darda, right? Darda, right? You guys paying attention? Darda or Dara, the same equals Darda is the same person. We are in the Comprehensive Dictionary of the Bible by William Smith from 1869. Darda. I just read the Bible where it says Hebrew pearl of wisdom. Darda, pearl of wisdom. A son of Mahol, and one of the 4 men of great fame for their wisdom, but surpassed by Solomon. Only Solomon was wiser than him, right? We got that verse. In 1 Chronicles 2:6, however, the same 4 names occur again as sons of Zarah. Sons of Zarah, right? Of the tribe of Judah. Darda, a son of Zarah through Mahol or Zarah, which is a son of Judah. Check out all my previous videos on that whole drop with Sarah and Fares. With the slight difference that Darda appears as Dara. Darda is Dara. The identity of these persons with those in 1 Kings 4:31 has been greatly debated, but there cannot be much reasonable doubt that they are the same. All right? It's the same because it's the same children. They just spelled it, they left out a word, the D, and Dara, but it's Darda, right? Darda, just like Dardanus, Darda, right? Darda, of the tribe of Judah, of the tribe of Judah. Okay, it is real quick, genealogyonline.nl says, family tree, Dardanus of Judahites. Darda or Dardanos, Judahites, huh? From the Judah tribe. A child of Zeus, huh? Or Jupiter, right? Same people. Jupiter and Zeus, Roman, Greek, right? Difference. Remember who is Zeus and Jupiter. We're going to go over that again today. Most likely that represents Judah, who is these people's dad, supposedly Saturn or Kronos. That's Israel. That's Jacob. We're going to go ahead and read that again a little bit later on today, but I just want to show you guys how a lot of people know this stuff, right? Darda, Dardanus. Darda is Dardanus, the founder of Troy. Okay, just to corroborate, we're going to get it from Flavius Josephus, aka Piso, too. The works of Flavius Josephus. All right, so he has so many books, and this is just like a collection of his books, translated by William Weston, M.A. Okay, we're just going to go to a specific part. Just want to reference something he says. Now, here in this part of the book, this is actually Antiquities of the Jews, book 8, chapter 2. And he's talking about Solomon and how the Bible also said the same thing, that Solomon was the only man who was wiser than Darda, right? And he repeats here, Josephus says, he also excelled and distinguished himself in wisdom, talking about Solomon, above those who were most eminent among the Hebrews. At that time, for shrewdness, those I mean were Ethan and Heman and Chalcol and Darda, the sons of Mahol, right? Mahol is the son of Sarah, a son of Judah. So corresponding with the line, Darda, right? Dardanos. Oh, but Kurimeo, he's not saying Dardanos, he's just saying Darda. They're not the same people. Yeah, well, I'm going to show you a different version of Josephus' writings, right? And he actually, this is the way he actually called them. And this is from the Greek translation. And this book right here was really hard to find, guys, this version. And it's actually, instead of being called Antiquities of the Jews, it's actually called Josephus' Jewish Antiquities. It's a whole different set of books. They almost all have the same info, but it's a whole different book series, right? And I found this in Jewish Antiquities, book 7, or book 8. Josephus with an English translation by H. St. J. Thackeray, M.A., and Ralph Marcus, Ph.D., in 9 volumes. This is volume 5, Jewish Antiquities, books 5 to 8. Okay? Harvard University. You guys see the year. Watch what Josephus is going to call Darda on this version of the book. And we go to the previous page. As you guys can see, this is the original Greek. This is the original Greek where they're translating this from. Okay? And this page, down in the bottom, this is page 593. He's again saying the same thing about Solomon. Just watch what he says, though. Listen up. It says, now, so great was the prudence and wisdom with Solomon, right? With God granted Solomon that he surpassed the ancients and even the Egyptians, who are said to excel all men in understanding, were not only, when compared with him, a little inferior, but proved to fall far short of the king in sagacity. He also surpassed and excelled in wisdom those who in his own time had a reputation for cleverness among the Hebrews, and whose name I shall not omit. They were Atanos, continuing right in the next page, and Hymanos, and Chalkeos, and Dardanos. All right, Dardanos, sons of Himaon. Okay, Dardanos, right? Dardanos. Look, Dardanos, ancient city of Troy, founded by Dardanus or Darda, right? Dardanus, go back. He's calling Dardanus. This is from the Greek translation, guys. You see, it's the same person, Dardanus. Now I'm going to go to the footnotes. You see how it has A, B, C, and D? It has footnotes, right? So this is some right here, but the A, B, and C are in the previous page. So he's going to tell you, look, Hymanos is A, Chalkeos is B, Dardanus is C. Let's go see what those are. So it says A, from the Bible, He-Man, B, from the Bible, Chalco, right? And C, from the Bible, Darda. Darda is Dardanos. Darda is Dardanos. And Hemaon, he wrote wrong, is D. D is Mahol. That's a son of Sarah. Mahol is a son of Sarah, so they are talking about the same guy. And again, Dardanos is Darda. You see that, guys? I'm not making this up. That's from Josephus himself, aka Piso. So Darda, as you guys can see here, Darda. C, right? Footnote C. You got Dardanos C, right? Dardanos. It's the same person, guys. Dardanos. Again, son of Zeus, huh? Zeus, or Jupiter. That is Judah, guys. Zeus is Judah. Dardanos. Darda. The founder of the city of Dardanus, Mount Ida. Yalida. We're going to read what Ida means too. That's all Hebrew stuff. The son of Zeus, right? Founder of Troy. Dardanos, who Josephus is letting you know. Dardanos, under C footnote, is from the Bible, Darda. It's the same person, Darda. All right? Dardanos, often mentioned in Greco-Egyptian magical texts as the founder of the mysteries of the mother goddess. You hear that? You hear that? Look at this. Side note right here. Dardanos, huh? We are talking about Dardanos. Dardanos, son of Zeus. Dardanos, but it's Darda from the Bible. Are we clear with that, guys? Are we clear with Darda and Dardanos, the founder of Troy, are the same person? Remember earlier, they graph a lot of times scripture or real people, real historical people, and make them into mythical characters or create mythology. It becomes a myth, but it's based on real people. All right, so real quick, guys, just want to read from this website. It's going to corroborate a lot of what we're learning today, what we already know from before, and what we're going to read a little bit later after this too. Now, this is from the ucg.org website or United Church of God website. You know, that's the hijack. Don't worry about who's publishing this. Look at the sources they are pointing out. And I want to go ahead and bring this up because we're going to read about this. We already did read about Mount Judah, but we didn't know that's what they were talking about. Mount Judah, huh? Who were they talking about? They're actually talking about Mount Ida. So the word Ida, eventually you guys are going to see, goes back to Judah. Judean, Judah. So again, Mount Ida, in Greek mythology, there's two sacred mountains are called Mount Ida. The mountain of the goddess. The mountain of the goddess, right? What did we just learn earlier? That Darda, the biblical Darda, right? Sees here a reference to the Dardanus, often mentioned in Greco-Egyptian magical texts as the founder of the mysteries of the mother goddess. Mother goddess, huh? Darda, Dardanus, Mount Ida. In Mount Ida, in the ancient Troy region, ancient Troy, Mount Ida, right? It says that both are associated with the mother goddess in the deepest layers of pre-Greek myth, in that Mount Ida in Anatolia was sacred to Cybele, who is sometimes called Mater Idaea, Idaean mother, while Rhea, often identified with Cybele, put the infant Zeus, who's Zeus we're going to see. Remember, who's Zeus again? Supposed to be the father of Darda. Judah, to nurse with Almathea at Mount Ida in Crete. Thereafter, his birthplace was sacred to Zeus, the king and father of Greek gods and goddesses. Look what it says here, though. Etymology. The term Ida is of unknown origin, okay? Period. Anything else, they're making it up. They say in Iliad, Ida means wooded hill, the name recalling the mountain worship, which was a feature of the Minoan mother goddess religion. The Minoans, huh? What did we just read about recently? Who's the Minoans? Weren't they the same ones that were bringing the Michigan copper over to Europe? Weren't they the main group of people bringing the so-called, Michigan copper? Supposedly Minoans came over here and mined it and then just left with it and then that's it? Yeah, they say Minoans. Who are the Minoans? They're coming from the true Holy Land. I told you that the true old world, the Americas. Look how they are associated with Mount Ida. All right, who are we associating with Mount Ida as well? Darda. He's the founder of Mount Ida. Okay, guys? Now, going back, it says here, Mount Judah. It says, discovered at the location considered to have been ancient Pylos, the Milesian point of origin, were hundreds of inscribed clay tablets baked hard by the fire that destroyed the palace. The tablets are inscribed in the so-called Linear B script found earlier in the palace at Knossos in Crete, as well as in excavations at Mycenae. Okay, this is a reference to one of two very similar Minoan scripts found in Crete. Linear A and B. Linear B turned out to be an early form of Greek, while Linear A has been the subject of controversy. So when we talk about early form of Greek, guys, it's literally Paleo-Hebrew. The late Cyrus Gordon claimed for his translation of Ugaritic, the language of Canaan, is not so respected for his decipherment of Linear A, as he claimed it is Semitic, like I just said, guys, or Hebraic Paleo-Hebrew, which modern scholarship has not been quite to embrace. Nevertheless, there is much to support his conclusions. Right, we're talking about that Minoan script they're talking about, guys, is actually Hebraic. That so-called Minoan script, right? You can see Gary Resberg's is Linear A Semitic, Biblical Archaeology Review, all right? You want to follow up on that. Though Linear B is Greek, it is interesting to know that it is used essentially the same syllabic system as that used in Crete to write what was probably Hebrew. Like I just said, early Greek is literally Paleo-Hebrew, guys. So-called Phoenician. And the Minoan civilization of Crete was closely related to the Mycenaean civilization of southern Greece. This provides yet another link between Israelites and ancient Greeks. Yes, so the Mycenaeans, a lot of Israelite blood there with the Mycenaeans. If you remember my Danite videos, especially, also involved in this, not just Judah, but Danites, a lot of Danites all over this area, so-called Greece, right, leaving their offspring there, leaving their people there, mixing, becoming these so-called Greeks, right? Moreover, the first century Roman historian Tacitus wrote, some say that the Jews were fugitives from the island of Crete. From the island of Crete, huh? who settled on the nearest coast of Africa about the time when Saturn was driven from his throne by the power of Jupiter. Jupiter, Zeus, by the powers of Judah. An apparent blending of myth with fact. Evidence of this is sought in the name. There is a famous mountain in Crete called Ida. The neighboring tribe, the Idai, came to be called Judai. Listen, by a barbarous non-Greco-Roman lengthening of the national name. Judai, Idai. Tacitus, the History's Book 5, great books of the Western world, all right? Check out the references. So it would appear that the tribe of Judah was represented in the early Israelite immigration into Greece, all right? Into Greece. Israelites, Hebrews going into so-called Greeks, becoming so-called Greeks in history to us, guys. This is what I'm saying when I always tell you guys, so-called Romans, so-called Greeks. Greece or Greeks include many different nations, Romans as well. These were empires, not specific people. They're blending all these different people together and calling them Greeks, and then a bunch of other people calling them Romans. Okay? Now, let's stay on this topic since we're talking about the island of Crete, right? Just something to corroborate with this. Let's go read something real quick, and we'll come back to this article. The Histories of Tacitus, an English translation with introduction, frontispiece, notes, maps, and index by George Gilbert Ramsay. And he's a part of all this stuff right here. This is from 1915. So this is a translation of Tacitus, Plinius Tacito, right? 5 books. We're going to go to book number 5. So real quick, because we're reading from Tacitus' writings, right? So you guys can understand again who all these people are supposed to be, right? Cornelius Tacitus. Publius Cornelius Tacitus, known simply as Tacitus. From AD 56 to 120. He's supposedly from that era, guys. Look how, again, supposedly a source from him, right? Was a Roman historian and politician. Tacitus is widely regarded as one of the greatest Roman historians by modern scholars. We're going to read what he has to say, okay, about Mount Ida and the Cretans, okay? One of the greatest Roman historians from this time period, in case you don't understand, all right? So what did he say? Let's go. All right, so all the way in book number 5, this is about page 398, it says here about the Jews, right? So-called Jews. I just want to show you here, says they're coming from Crete. Yeah, it says the story goes that the Jews were fugitives from the island of Crete who settled upon the extreme borders of Africa. So, extreme borders. So, they weren't in Africa or coming from Africa, right? Either, first of all. So, he said they were coming from Crete, that island with the Mycenaean Empire, right? The Mycenaeans who were practicing Levitical laws, who are Israelites. We got Tacitus letting us know that the story where he heard, that the Jews were fugitives on the island of Crete. They were fleeing Egypt, remember? They were still fleeing. They were still on the move. So continuing with Tacitus, continuing with these people from Crete, he says, evidence for this story is discovered in their name. All right? Evidence of what? Of them being so-called Jews or Hebrews or Israelites. So he's saying, just look at the name. The name of Idai, so Mount Idai, right? Idai, Judai, a tribe bordering on the famous Mount Ida in Crete. That was a real people, Idai, right? They were there in Mount Ida in Crete, having been lengthened by foreign corruption into the form Judai. Look at that, Judah, Judah. Some say that the superabundant population of Egypt was discharged into the bordering countries in the reign of Isis, all right? They're saying a population coming out of Egypt, right? Just like the Exodus, right? Exodus is coming out of so-called Egypt. And remember, when they say in Egypt, they mean ancient Egypt. They mean the real one in America, to marry ancient Egypt, the true Holy Land, the true Canaan, the true old world. So a large population coming out of Egypt during the reign of Isis under the leadership of Hierosolimus. Hierosolimus is like another way of saying Jerusalem, Jerusalem. and Judas. Many assert that the Jews were an Ethiopian race, meaning so-called black, driven out by fear or hatred to seek a new home in the reign of King Cepheus. Others relate that they were an interloping horde from Assyria, who, being destitute of land, took possession of part of Egypt, and then afterwards settled in towns and lands of their own in the Hebrew country on the borders of Syria. Okay? Others again give the Jews an illustrious origin, asserting that the Solimi, all right, that's a people, a race celebrated in Homer's poems. The Solimi called the city which they had built Jerusalem, after their own name. That's literally Jerusalem, guys, Jerusalem. Most writers agree in this, that in the reign of King Bocchus, a loathsome plague broke out in Egypt, and that when the king consulted the oracle of Hammon for a remedy, he was bidden to purge his kingdom and to deport that tribe as being hateful to the gods to some other country. All right, coming out of Egypt, being deported, huh? Hunted up and brought together, the multitude were left in the wilderness, where they were abandoning themselves to tears and torpor, when they were warned by one of the exiles called Moses, listen, not to look for help to either gods or men. All right, that's literally the story of Exodus, guys. This is from Tacitus. This is his version of it, from where he got it, his sources, his oral tradition. He's like, hey, one of these exiles was Moses, both of whom had deserted them, he said, but to trust to themselves under the heaven-sent leader who should be the first to help them out of their present troubles. Their frequent fasts bear witness even now to the long famine of their early days, and Jewish bread is still made without leaven, as a sign of how they devour their corn. Their corn, right? Isn't corn an American plant? Corn, flattened bread, huh? The leavened bread. Yeah. They reposed upon every seventh day, they explained by saying that it was the seventh day that brought an end to their labors. Afterwards, beguiled by the sweets of ease, they gave up to indulgence every seventh year also. Others say this was done in honor of Saturn, either because they received the elements of their faith from the Idai, who we are told were driven from forth with Saturn. All right, listen. Idai, Judah. Saturn is Jacob. Jacob's son is Judah. Saturn is Israel. We're going to get that drop again today, guys. Look, this is what you have to understand. Know the context. Remember, in the beginning of this video, we told you they turned biblical people and real people into mythological characters. So, Idai, Judai, you heard already. That's Judai, who we are told were driven forth with Saturn, with Israel, with the Israelites, or with Jacob, and became the founders of their race, or because Saturn is the most potent of the seven stars, which rule the affairs of men and moves in the highest orbit, and because most of the heavenly bodies perform their functions in their courses in multiples of seven. All right, that's the hijack. So I just wanted to read that real quick, guys, as you guys can see. Tacitus, ancient so-called Greek historian, right, telling you who was in Crete, or Mount Ida, right? Mount Ida, Judah. These were people coming out of Exodus. All right, we're going to get the drop from Diodorus as well, too, a little bit soon. So before that, we're going to go back to the article, right? So again, we just got corroboration from Tacitus, what we were reading in that other article that we're going to go back to right now. So back in the article, right? Aegean royal lines from Zarah. Go back to where we left off. So we continue saying here, surprisingly, there was another Mount Ida, right? Mount Judah, right? In northwestern Asia Minor. So where's Asia Greater? If there's an Asia Minor, Asia Greater, North America, huh? Or connected to Northern Asia with North America, Tartary, near the site of ancient Troy. So there was a Mount Ida near the site of ancient Troy. You get that Encyclopedia Britannica, 1985, volume 6, all right, page 238, a publication by the Christian Israel Foundation knows that perhaps the most striking evidence of an Israelitish migratory settlement in Cretan Mycenae is to be found in renowned pioneer archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans' monumental work Mycenaean tree and pillar cult, in which it is established that Hebrew rituals were observed. All right, we got the drop already, guys, in past videos. They were practicing Levitical stuff too, these Mycenaeans. This culture moved to Asia Minor, where behind Troy we find a Mount Ida, Judah. And whereas in Miletus survived the belief in the Cretan royal descent, the Cretan royal descent from Mount Ida, from Mount Judah. This is where the royal descent. Remember, the scepter will never leave Judah. He will always have the seat to the throne. So regarding the Trojans, pay attention now, right? One author writes, later Greek myths indicate that they came from the same source as the Mycenaeans, but moved farther north to cross into Asia Minor at the Bosporus, the strait between the Sea of Marmara and the Black Sea and Russia. They then migrated into what is now Turkey. Finally, a branch under Ilus founded Troy under the name Ilium, hence Homer's Iliad. The name Troy, according to Greek tradition, came from Ilus' father, Tros. All right, guys, breaking it down. Tros, Troy. Who's Tros? Well, we're going to read soon, like Tros is a descendant of Darda, guys. Okay? Now, it says here, the royal house of Troy. The traditional founder of Troy's famed royal house was Dardanus, a few generations prior to Tros and Ilus. In his acclaimed story of civilization, historian Will Durant writes, who were the Trojans? An Egyptian papyrus mentions certain Darda, right? Dardinu, as among the allies of the Hittites. Allies of the Hittites, Katai, the Hittites, at the Battle of Kadesh. It is likely that these were the ancestors of the Dardanoi, who in Homer's terminology are one with the Trojans. Probably these Dardani were of Balkan Greek origin, probably. That's Darda's people, Judah, right? Crossed the Hellespont in the 16th century. Herodotus, Greek father history of the 5th century BC, however, identified the Trojans with the Trucrians, right? And the Trucrians, according to the 1st century BC Greco-Roman geographer Strabo, were Cretans who settled in Troad. Perhaps after the fall of Knossos, both Crete and the Troad had a sacred Mount Ida. Again, same people. This is all becoming much clearer again. These people were evidently Israelites, most likely Judahites or Jews, so-called Jews, Judah, tribe of Judah, huh? Indeed, even many of the Mycenaean royal houses of southern Greece appear to have sprung from the royal lineage of Crete. Okay, from the royal lineage of Crete, and we already know that's Judah right there, which seems to have been so-called Jewish or Israelite Hebrew people. It is interesting to consider that according to Homer, the shields of the Greek leaders in the Trojan War, were decorated with heraldic eagles and lions. These were the Israelite tribal emblems of Dan and Judah, respectively. Like I've been trying to tell you guys, a lot of Danites, and this time, a lot of these so-called Greeks were Danites, and now you got these Judah people coming, they'll mix and they're coming together, they make alliances, and then they go to war against each other. The lion also appeared on the shields of the Trojans, okay? Continue a little further down, it says Zarah, right, or Sarah, and the line of Dardanus. So what we're going to do now, guys, is basically read some more accounts of what other historians, primary sources, we're talking about really old accounts for these so-called Greek philosophers. Like, we're going to go into Diodorus, for example, and he's going to let you know who these people settled in Athens and these Greek lands or Greek people really were, and how they were coming out of an exodus out of Egypt. All right, we're going to get into who Cadmus and who's Danaus or Dananus. We already got that in my Danite video, so we're going to get this drop again a little bit, just so you guys can see. There's a lot of history stating that out of this exodus out of Egypt, a lot of these Israelite people ended up as the royal lines of the Greeks, the founders of Greek cultures, so-called Roman, and as we already know, in the British Isles, you know, when we talk about Asia, the Saxons, Sakai, you know, Parthians, all that, right? We're going to go over a little bit of that again, but, you know, just so you guys know, all right, let's go ahead and get it again. To the works of Diodorus of Sicily. Yeah, the famous Diodorus they always quote, right? The Greek historian. We're going right into volume 12. All right, and we're going to be reading from book 40, the last book and the last chapter. All right, so we belly flop to this part of the book on book 40 where Diodorus basically gives his overview of the history of the Hebrews, right? And the reason he does that is because he's going to show the relationship between the ancient Greeks and these so-called Jews or Hebrews. It says here, now that we are about to record the war against the Jews, we consider it appropriate to give first a summary account of the establishment of the nation from its origins and of the practices observed among them. When in ancient times a pestilence arose in Egypt, the common people ascribed their troubles to the workings of a divine agency. For indeed, with many strangers of all sorts dwelling in their midst and practicing different rites of religion and sacrifice, their own traditional observances in honor of the gods had fallen into disuse. Hence, the natives of the land surmised that unless they removed the foreigners, their troubles would never be resolved. All right? So Diodorus is talking about literally the plagues of Egypt that we read about in the Bible. You know, what we read about Moses doing with the help of the Most High, with the staff and everything, so that Pharaoh can let his people go. Now, the way Diodorus is writing about it, he's saying there was a pestilence and that they were causing trouble to the native population, the Egyptians, right? Descendants of Mizraim and Cush. He don't mention that they were actually enslaving these other people that they wanted to get rid of. We know the other side of the story. So they wanted to get rid of the so-called Jews or Hebrews, right? These foreigners in Egypt. At once, therefore, the aliens were driven from the country, and at the most outstanding and active among them banded together, and, as some say, were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. So listen to what Diodorus is letting you know, that during the Exodus, right? Literally, this is what he's talking about. They weren't driven out from the country. They left. They rebelled and freed themselves from bondage out of Egypt. They left to help with the Most High. And Diodorus is letting you know that during this Exodus, right, of the Israelites, Hebrews, they banded together, and some say were cast ashore in Greece and certain other regions. Their leaders were notable men, chief among them being Dardanus. Okay, Dardanus. Dardanus in Greek mythology was the king of Libya. His myth is a foundation legend of Argos, whose the Argives is Danites too, as one of the foremost Mycenaean cities of the Peloponnesus and Homer's Iliad. Danan's tribe of Dan or Dardanus, the Argives. Again, Dardanus and the Danans are the Danites. They did come out of the Exodus. And also Cadmus, yes, the historical, mythical Cadmus, right? In Greek mythology, Cadmus was the legendary Phoenician founder of Boeotian Thebes, the founder of Thebes, okay? Cadmus, an exiled Israelite. I'm not the one saying that. Diodorus is telling us Dardanus and Cadmus, they're supposed to be mythical people, half gods. And like I've been showing you, these Greeks turned a lot of these antediluvian people, characters, into gods and created a mythological story about their origins. But again, Phoenician Cadmus, who's the Phoenicians? Remember in my Nations of the World Day and Night video? So who are the Phoenicians? You always got to really study that. Get specific when they're saying Phoenician. Either way, Phoenicia, the land of Phoenicia, was in Canaan, the promised land. That was in America. You already know these people wore feather crowns. We got that on the last video. So Diodorus is letting you know, again, they became leaders and notable men. These people coming out of the Exodus from Egypt, these Israelites, like Dardanus and Cadmus. But the greater number were driven into what is now called Judea, which is not far distant from Egypt and was at that time utterly uninhabited. The colony was headed by a man called Moses, outstanding both for his wisdom and for his courage. So who are we talking about? Judea, Moses, people coming out of Egypt, same people that Dardanus and Cadmus came out of. This is Diodorus letting you know, supposedly in the 1st century BC, according to their hijack chronologies, right? But they're letting you know still who these people are. Again, confirming what we've been already going over. On taking possession of the land he founded, remember that it wasn't Moses exactly who reached Jerusalem, but Joshua, his successor. Besides other cities, one that is now the most renowned of all, called Jerusalem. Now listen to Diodorus telling people about Jerusalem like they've never heard about it. This is a very old primary source, letting you know who Dardanus and Cadmus people are, the same people who founded Jerusalem, who followed their leader Moses, who came out of Egypt to marry the real Egypt, America, to marry. So just to get another account real quick, this is a whole other version that says here Diodorus of Sicily, with an English translation by C.H. Oldfather, professor of ancient history and languages, the University of Nebraska, in 10 volumes. This is, I guess, volume 1, book 1 and 2. All right, and here's the year. Now, again, I just want to show you, we got the Greek original, and then on the next page, you got the translation. Just want to belly flop to this part. It says here, now the Egyptians say that also, after these events, a great number of colonies were spread from Egypt over all the inhabited world. From Egypt, right? From the real ancient Egypt, from ancient America to Babylon. For instance, colonists were led by Belus, who was held to be the son of Poseidon in Libya. And after establishing himself on the Euphrates River, he appointed priests called Chaldeans, so-called Chaldeans, huh? So Ireland, ancient Ireland, by the Babylonians, who were exempt from taxation and free from every kind of service to the state, as are the priests of Egypt. And they also make observations to the stars, following the example of the Egyptian priests, physicists, and astrologers. They say also that those with Dardanus, those who left or fled with Dardanus, likewise from Egypt, who left with Dan, right? Dardanus, the tribe of Dan, settled what is practically the oldest city of Greece. Here we go, another account, Argos, and then the Argonauts, right? Who? Danites. And that the nation of the Colchi and Pontus and that of the Jews, which lies between Arabia and Syria, were founded as colonies by certain emigrants from their country. And this is the reason why it is a long-established institution among these two peoples to circumcise their male children, the custom having been brought over from Egypt, from ancient America. Even the Athenians, they say, are colonists from Sais, right? The Athenians, right? Who founded Athens, Cadmus, they say are colonists from Sais in Egypt, and they undertake to offer proofs of such a relationship. For the Athenians are the only Greeks who call their city Asti, a name brought over from the city Asti in Egypt. Okay, as you guys see, Dardanus and so-called Jews in these areas, first cities, the oldest cities of Greece, okay? From this book, Ancient History of Caledonia, written by Saint Chaldean and the other saints of the Chaldean faith, and chiefly by the Johnstones, who held the royal pen for many hundreds years, translated from the Latin by the Reverend Duncan MacGregor. And this book is from 1874. It says here, Ancient History of Caledonia. After the death of Pharaoh, who loved Joseph, the king of Egypt, and his rulers saw that the Hebrews prospered more than the Egyptians, that their fields and their vines were more fruitful and pleasant, and also that their wives and daughters were more fair and beautiful than their own. Pharaoh, the king, then made a law that all those who did not bow down the knee to the bull and offer sacrifices upon the king's altar were to be double tied and their children brought into slavery, which grieved the Hebrews very much, but they still remembered their God, and went to the desert and offered sacrifice to the God of Bethel. Pharaoh then, being wroth of this, brought all the Hebrews under slavery. The Egyptian slaves got straw to make their bricks, but the Hebrews had to collect stubble and make the same number of bricks as the Egyptians, which made their task very grievous to bear. But they still trusted that God would deliver them from bondage. The king Pharaoh was enraged and ordered all the Hebrew children to be slain when they were born. This caused several of the tribes of the Hebrews to draw together, who never defiled themselves among the Egyptians. They then departed into the desert and withdrew themselves from among them. Pharaoh the king, being wroth, pursued them into the desert with horses and chariots. The Israelites, all right, now they're not just Hebrews, they're Israelites specifically, seeing Pharaoh's host at hand, cried to the God of Bethel to deliver them from the hand of their enemy. Then the God of heaven raised a storm of wind and sand, mountains high, so that they could not find them, and afterwards left them to wander through the desert of Assyria, chiefly living upon fruit. All right, remember, they're over here kind of going almost with the story of Moses, right? Exodus coming out of Egypt. A different take on it here. The king of Greece, observing encampments and being at war with the Egyptians and Assyrians, sent an ambassador to inquire if they had broken the truce that had been made. But they found nothing but working men of crafty work. Now, real quick, so you guys don't get confused. They're in the wilderness, right? They're in the desert. The Israelites just left Egypt during their exodus. They reached these lands where there's a king, so-called king of Greece. This is a Danite. This is when the Danites were ruling this part of Greece. This was a Danite. We got the other side of the story in my Danite videos. And you're going to see he didn't make war with these Israelites. So he's like, go spy on them. So he had sent somebody to spy on them. And then the person said, hey, I'm only finding working men of crafty work, namely copper, brass, dyeing and weaving, and also brick making. The king then, finding they were Hebrews, dispatched an Hebrew interpreter, whom they told that they were no rebellious people, that they were under the necessity of fleeing from Egypt to the desert from the oppression and cruelty of Pharaoh. The Hebrew servant returned and told the king of Greece that they were not men of war, but were working men of craftsmen of Egypt. The king, being pleased with such good news, sent his servant again, telling them to pitch their tents in any plain in his dominions where they pleased, telling them at the same time that they could worship their own God after their own fashion. Now, why would Greeks do that? Remember, this is a Danite. These are his people. Now, another thing I want to point out, he's saying working men of Egypt doesn't mean they're Egyptians. They were coming out of Egypt, just like a so-called gypsy is somebody who's coming out of Egypt, or an Egyptian. They would be referred to as Egyptian, or gypsies too. They're traveling right in the desert, so-called gypsies. It's all going to combine. You guys will see. The Hebrews then built an altar to the Lord and offered sacrifice for the great deliverance and saving them from the hands of the Egyptians. The king of Greece visited their camps with his Hebrew servant, telling them to build a city and fortify themselves against their enemies, whoever they might be. They, having confidence in this king of Greece, all right, they trust this king of Greece, and seeing that the Lord's hand was in their deliverance, commenced to build their city of Troy. Who built Troy? Israelites. And we're going to see specifically who was the founder and from which tribe of the Israelites. All right. So again, these Israelites fleeing Egypt, Exodus, just like Cadmus and Danaan. We're talking about Israelites settling down, becoming great nations, these so-called early Greek nations. Here's another case of it right here. They built the city of Troy. It was Israelites. The materials of which this city was built were bricks made of clay. This clay was dug to make a canal round the whole city, with drawbridges to draw up at any time for securing them from their enemies. The work went on so rapidly that they soon found themselves in a fortified position. And as the population increased, so did the city enlarge, the building going on with much vigor. And at the same time, the other tradesmen were employed at their own trades, supplying the other nations around them with purple, scarlet, and fine linen, purple, and war instruments of brass, copper, and iron. This surprised the kings of Egypt very much, he having labored under the impression that all the Hebrews were consumed in the mountains of sand, which nearly destroyed the Egyptians, but these had rather served as a protection to the Hebrews. The king of Greece gave every encouragement to the Hebrews, so did he adhere to their ways that he was almost persuaded to worship their God. Almost. Remember, this is a Danite. A Danite who, these were sea peoples. They had gone all over the world and mixed, and, they were probably doing a little pagan stuff too. They become Hellenized. But owing to his rulers, he almost started going back to Hawa, it says here. But owing to his rulers being worshippers of the horse, they would not allow the king to turn from his former principle, namely worshiping the horse, as the priest persuaded the king if he would turn from worshiping the horse, as that was the god of the Grecians in those days, all right? So-called Grecians, that his charges would not face the battle nor enter into the war chariots. Still, the king's heart was with the Hebrews, all right? This king, this Danite, he was with his brethren, and he allowed them to go on pilgrimage to the tops of the highest mountains to worship the God of heaven for his great deliverance of them from the cow worshippers of Egypt and the tyranny of Pharaoh. Cow worshippers of Egypt, huh? Just like the Hindus. This was their custom for several hundreds of years until war fell out between Greece and Assyria. So they were there for hundreds of years, okay? The Israelites. The Hebrews then refused their young men to go to war, neither would they allow their daughters to be given in marriage to the uncircumcised Gentiles, unless they would consent to be circumcised and offer 7 years' sacrifice in worshiping the god of Bethel. Afterwards, one of the Grecian princes fell wroth with the inhabitants of Troy, properly called the Trojans. Who are the Trojans? Israelites. There was born to one of the princes of Troy a daughter that expelled in beauty and virtue all the Grecian nation. The prince of the Grecians offered her his hand in marriage, but was refused by the laws of the altar. He then besieged the city of Troy with rage and drove them into the city, thinking he would make them surrender from hunger. But they cried out to the Lord, and he heard their cry and was pleased to send shoals of fish of all kinds. But the sturgeon was considered the best fish, and therefore it was chosen for sacrifice on the altar. The turtle doves and pigeons were also innumerable around the city. They also made use of them for food, being also offered for sacrifice. The wild bee was also very plentiful, supplying them with honey. They lived there in comfort while their enemies were encamped around the city, suffering many privations. But the young generation arose, and new rulers refused to offer the sacrifices with the sturgeon, for as it was the best fish, they wished to keep it for themselves and offer other fish to the Lord. So remember, we're not reading the Bible. This is an old land document containing the history of Caledonia. All right? So because of what they were doing, Most High stopped helping them. All right, so it keeps going. I just want you guys to see, Troy was built by Israelites, as it says in this ancient document. Our race, its origin, and its destiny. A serial devoted to the study of the Saxon riddle. The renewal of history, how empire was rebuilt and replanted. Eochaid, the hegemon. And this is by Charles A.L. Totten. This is from 1892. And this part says, Moses now grows up as a prince in the house of Pharaoh. He is given the best education that Egypt could afford, and had for his companions in the schools Heman and Chalcol and Darda, the sons of Mahol, or Asariah, who was the son of Ethan, the son of Zarah, the son of Judah. Now, Chalcol and Darda were none other than Cecrops and Dardanus, okay? This is another book telling you that Darda is the same as Dardanus and Chalcol is Cecrops in Greece, in ancient Greece, Cecrops. Again, both sons of Judah, the founders of Greece and Troy, okay? Sons of Judah, founders of Greece and Troy. Cecrops founded Athens, right? We're going to get more into that in another video. And Heman is the founder of Tyre, all right? Heman founded Tyre. Who's the Tyrians, so-called Phoenicians? Why is Herod the Great dealing with Solomon and King David? Because eventually they are king. They are related some way further back. And they also got Danite. The Tyrians got a lot of Danite blood. We've gone over that in my Danite videos. So Heman, again, all these people, sons of Judah, studied these nations. All right, so we continue a little further in the book. It says here, the renewal of history, or Eochaid, the hegemon. Remember, he comes from Shakol, the son of Shakol marrying Scotia, an Egyptian princess who has Esau as an ancestor, but Echad is coming down from the line of Judah. Part 3 says here, Pharez and Sarah, their genealogies harmonized. The genealogy of Darda, the founder of the Trojan line, is given to Aeneas, who carried his traditions to Rome. Okay, Aeneas, he was a line of Judah. The sons of Shrew are important. Cadmus, again, Cadmus, we already got him, being known on account of his itineraries in many lands, and Zarah being the father of Partalon, one of the primitive settlers in Ireland. Okay, so you see how these people all connect. This information is found in some histories, Vide o Halloran, but is printed in small type because it is doubtful, it being at least possible that Partalon was a pure Danan. All right, that's what I was saying. I've been saying that to you guys. These people, a lot of them have Danite blood in them too. They are pure Danan, a lot of them. We got that clear, right? Finally. All right, so real quick, because we're going to get into Kronos and other deities in the book we're going to be reading real quick, I just wanted to show that this information is old. It's been written since ancient times and in other books, scholarly books as well. So disciple this one by Isaac Preston Corey is called Corey's Ancient Fragments of the Phoenician, Carthaginian, Babylonian, Egyptian, and other authors. It's about 1876. Right here, he's letting everybody know, they're getting this from Eusebius, who's quoting Sanction, and Philo, and all these people. They're all saying the same thing. They're saying for Cronus or Saturn, that's the Roman version. Remember, Greek Kronos is Saturn, whom the Phoenicians call Israel. Okay? The Phoenicians call Kronos Israel. Wait, isn't Israel the name of Jacob and his descendants? Right? So, Kronos or Saturn, whom the Phoenicians call Israel, and who after his death was deified and instated in the planet which bears his name. So, Saturn, so after he died, who? Israel, he got deified as Saturn. When he was king and had by a nymph of the country called Anobret, an only son, who on that account is styled Yud, Jehud, Judah. Literally, guys, this is Judah, so it makes sense. Look. So Kronos has a son named Judah, and Kronos is, by the Phoenicians, called Israel. So that's Jacob. That actually matches. Judah is a son. Yud. They spell it in different ways with a Y, Jehud, and different accounts. So again, this is from Eusebius, who's quoting Sanction, a Phoenician historian. And just real quick, in the index of this book, it says Il or Israel. So El and Il is Israel. Il is Jacob, name of Kronos. Listen. So Ilus, another way, example Kronos or Israel. Israel, a Phoenician name of Kronos. And then look at this. Jehud. See, I told you they spell it with a J and a Y. Jehud or Jehud. Sample Jahid, only son, name of son of Kronos by the nymph Anobret. Right? So Jehud, Judah, the son of Kronos. And Kronos is Israel. So it makes sense. Kronos or Il or Israel. Okay? We clear? Just want to show you other versions. This is much more recent, 1981. Supposed to be the accounts of Philo of Byblos. And he's also quoting Sanction. But this time they leave out the Israel. And it says, now Kronos, whom the Phoenicians call El. Remember, Israel, who was in their land and who was later divinized after his death as the star of Kronos. Right? The planet Saturn. Had an only son by a local bride named Anobret. And therefore they called him Yud, Judah. Okay? So we go back to another version of Corey's ancient fragments of the Phoenician, Carthaginian, Babylonian, and Egyptian and other authors, right? And look what he's saying about Kronos here. Well, not him, but he's quoting these ancient historians, right? It says, Kronos offered up his only son as a sacrifice, just like Abraham, right? Just like Abraham and Isaac. So the stories are getting mixed, but These are real people. Cronus offered up his son as a sacrifice to his father Uranus. Remember, all these are from America. Remember my series, Researches into the Lost History of America. So what did he say he did? He circumcised himself. Why would Kronos circumcise himself? Wasn't only the Israelites doing that? Huh? Circumcising themselves? And look what he did. And compelled his allies to do the same. And he made the people do the same. He circumcised himself. Kronos, who is Israel, right? Israel or Jacob circumcised himself and compelled his allies to do the same. His people, you guys gotta circumcise yourself. So real quick, I'm in this book now. Let me just zoom in. It's called the Macmillan Bible Atlas by Aharoni Yohanan, 1977. Page 107 here says the Persian Empire. And it says that right here, right, Esther 8:9. So they just quoted something. It says the fifth satrapy was Abarnahara, that is, beyond the river Euphrates. And one of his lands was Jehud. Yehud, Judah. Yehud is Judah. I'm trying to tell you guys that is Judah. It says here on page 109, it says in the list of the returning exiles, Ezra and Nehemiah, right, all these chapters and verses, there also appears the names of major settlements of Jehud, Yehud, the son of Kronos, Jehud. The list of the builders of the wall gives details of the district governors. Additional evidence of the extent of Judah are the seal impressions on storage jars, similar to the belonging to the kings. Seal impressions of the days of the first temple, on which appear the name Jehud in various forms, often accompanied by a symbol or the name of a priest or governor. The distribution of these sealings reaches from Mizpeh and Jericho in the north of Bethsur and En-Gedi in the south and Gezer in the west. These were the borders of the reduced Judah of the beginning of the period of the Second Temple, the nucleus around which grew the kingdom of Hasmoneans. I told you a lot of these Hasmoneans did have Israelite blood, right? The Pisos kind of like involved with all this too. All right, bro, I just wanted to point out that there's literally historic seals, as it says right here, guys, on the left. Inscription, Jehud, and seal impression, Jehud. The word Yehud. Yehud is a son of Kronos. Yehud, a son of Kronos. Kronos, as the Phoenicians call him, Israel. Okay? We clear with all this, right? What I wanted to show, guys, before I get into the other book that I'm going to be reading real quick, is to show you that it's not just that book. It's not just that author making it up. This has been written before by Sanctonian, Philo, and all these historians, supposedly. Okay, I want to show you that Judah was in Asia. Remember the Assyrian captivity, right? In the Jewish Virtual Library, it says here Babylonia, the Jewish Virtual Library. We're going to read about the Parthians. I just had a video about this, guys. The Parthians, a lot of them were Israelites. They were Hebrews, right? It says here that information on Babylonian Jewry under Parthian rule, not abundant. There is information on a Babylonian Jew, Samaris or Simri, again, right? We're in 1 Chronicles 6:16, right? The sons of Zarah are, again, Simri, Ethan, Heman, Calco, and Darda. Again, Simri, go back to the Jewish website. So in Parthia, remember, who immigrated to Palestine during Herod's reign, Simri, he went with his feudal retinue. All the information about him points to him as a Babylonian Jewish noble. So he is of royal blood. He is the son of Mahol, a son of Sarah, a son of Judah. That's why he's a Babylonian Jewish noble, exilar, who had fully mastered the arts of war as practiced by the Parthians. In later times, we hear of Babylonian Jews called Arda Arta and Pil Barish Arda Arta. All right, so I just wanted to point this out to you guys that the history is getting deep. Like, we're getting really close to start pinpointing certain nations and people who they really are. And so before I read this other book, just want to go ahead and remind you of all this right here. And we just read about the Parthians. So this is matching what we just read the other day. They didn't get specific as to say who exactly was their progenitor, but this is one of them. This is one of them, Simri. I know they had other ones we read in the Parthian video. Okay? All right, so now we're going to get into this other book real quick. All right? I'm going to read from this book. It's called Judah's Scepter, A Historical and Religious Perspective. This is by Brian Arundel Howard of Wardour. And we're going to go to chapter 1 of this book, and it's actually called Jacob, Judah, Zarah, the Scepter, and Lion. Okay? So we go a little bit down in this chapter. Start right here. It says, the journey of Zarah is also part of the biblical story of Jacob of Israel and his connection with Pillar Stone in the desert. This is the stone that would become the witness to all future king thrones of Judah and Israel. The sons of Judah are Onan, Shelah, Farah, and Zarah. And Onan died in the land of Canaan. The story of Zarah is about the Zarah Hebrew tribes of Judah, whose wife Tamar bore twins. Zarah revealed his right hand, of which a scarlet thread or cord was tied around the wrist. Remember the story that his hand came out first, and this whole scarlet thread around the hand that's very famous in the British Isles. Zarah revealed his right hand, of which a scarlet thread or cord was tied around the wrist. His twin brother, Farah, however, or Perez, right, would be born first. He breached out, remember? Thus his brother Farah would steal his brother's birthright by coming out of the womb first. Farah became the Messianic bloodline, the Golden Line nation of Judah, and Zarah becomes the Gaelic Christian bloodline, or Scarlet Line nations of Judah. The descendants of Zarah are the Trojans, okay? Spartan, the Gaelic tribes that go back over 1400 years before Christ. All right, Gaelic, original Gaelic, Trojan, Spartans. The tribe of Zarah fled out of Egypt before the great Exodus by Moses, before the Exodus. You can have a little time frame. Before the great Exodus by Moses, Hebrew tribe under the Pharaoh Ramses. Sarah's journey started when he and his tribe moved out of the land of Egypt and across the coast of the Mediterranean to the Aegean Sea. All right, who's the Aegeans? The so-called Greeks, and up into the Black Sea. The Zarah tribes transformed themselves over 2,000 years from the ancient tribes of the Mediterranean to the pre-Catholic kings of Western Europe. The biblical sons of Zarah were Simri, Ethan, Heman, son of Judah, right? Calcol, all right, Calcol, and Dardanus, all right, Dardanus, 5 of them in all. Dardanus, the founder of Troy's royal lineage. Chalcol established the great city of Athens, all right? Chalcol established Athens. Dardanus established Troy. And Simri established the eastern Black Sea. Through these 3 sons nurtured and fathered the nations of ancient Mediterranean area and Europe. The other tribes and factions of Zarah moved from the Greek Isles and the Black Sea by land north or up the Danube River. These 3 sons of Zarah, however, are the most notable in history, who carried on to do great things for the populace and journey abroad, consolidating their culture, religion, and royal administration. The migration of the Zarah tribes are put into 3 groups and 2 main migration routes. The first group is Chalcol, sons who became the Milesians, okay? Who became the Milesians? Chalcol. And again, who's Chalcol? A son of Zarah. And who's Zarah? A son of Judah. So his sons again became the Milesians, became the Hyksos, Egyptian, the Iberian, Spain, Irish, and Scots tribes who made their migrations by ocean. The second group comes out of Dardanus' sons that become the Trojans, Celts, all right, the Celts, Franks, Scandinavians, and part of the British Isles. Now remember, in history, these people are dealing with Danites and also with other nations like the Sumerians. The third group came out of Simri and Colchis, sons who become the Scythians or Scots, Saxon, and Suebians of Scandinavia, okay? That migrated by land north and west into Europe. All right, Saxons, sons of Isaac, all these people, sons of Isaac, right? Because they come out of Isaac, then Jacob, then all the 12 tribes. We got Sarah coming out of Judah. And Sarah had all these kids, Cymri Colchis, Scythian Scots, Saxon Suebians of Scandinavia, that migrated by land north and west into Europe. They all could speak and understand different variations of the Gaelic language, with its roots being Hebrew, the Gaelic being Hebrew, the roots, what we're talking about are Moroccan. Therefore, from Sarah, God multiplied and spread across the lands of the Mediterranean and Europe, and in each of a royal prince made of his descendants. The question that needs to be revealed is, who were Judah and Sarah? Biblically, they are the descendants of Jacob, out of Israel. Remember, Jacob is Israel. But to the ancient world before Christ, they were much more. The discovery by the ancient Phoenician historian Saint Kurimeo, who lived around 1200 BC, tried to make sense of this issue. It must be recognized that all material from Saint Kurimeo is derived from the works of Philo of Byblos, flourished 100 AD. Are we just talking about Ariel's Piso, the Pisos? Remember my Piso series? He might be Philo, who claimed to have translated his Phoenicia from the original text. Some have questioned the authenticity of that claim, but excavations at Ras Shamra, ancient Ugarit in Syria, in 1929 revealed Phoenician documents supported much of St. Kurimeo information on Phoenician mythology and religious beliefs. The writings of St. Kurimeo mention the Greek Chronos, from the Phoenicians call Israel. Hold up. So he's saying St. Kurimeo, right, famous Greek historian, saying Chronos is the same one the Phoenicians call Israel. Who's Israel? Remember, Israel is Jacob. Israel was the new name given to the biblical patriarch Jacob. The Phoenicians historian further explained that this Chronos or Israel had a special son named Jehud or Jehud. So even Chronos had a son named Jehud, just like Jacob has a son named Jehudah. This is simply a shortened form of the Hebrew Jehudah or Judah. The primary son of the Greek Chronos, Roman Saturn, was Zeus, Roman Jupiter. Therefore, Jehud would be the same as Zeus. So they're saying Judah is Zeus. So you see what they're trying to tell you here is that the Greeks turned all these people into their gods. That's what I was saying earlier. So again, don't get confused. Chronos, Jacob, his son Zeus, principal is Judah, Zeus, or Jehud, Zeus. Therefore, Jehud would be the same as Zeus. The word Zeus may actually derive from Jehud, as the Roman Jupiter, as it appears to derive from the Greek Zeus pater, or Sut pater, Sut meaning a king, to a common bloodline, Hebrew, and pater meaning father. In the Aeneid by Virgil, the word Jupiter is synonymous with Zeus. Therefore, one can surmise that the following names are synonymous with both Hebrew and Phoenician names as Isaac, Uranus, Jacob, Chronos, Saturn, Judah, Jupiter or Zeus, and Sarah could be Zeus too, right? A son of Zeus or descendant of Zeus or descendant of Judah, a son of Judah. This is the Phoenician explanation of name terminology, but it is muddled in ancient beliefs and pagan ideas. Thus, it must be looked at from another standpoint that merits logical terminology of the period. The period in which Judah lived was a time of famine and attacks by the Egyptian pharaoh, who in victories recorded on the wall at Karnak expected tribute and sons of leaders given as hostages for his reward. Judah, known to the Phoenicians as Jupiter and also known as Zeus, the Olympian in Greece, left for the Mediterranean region. Judah is given the name of Zeus, the Olympian, probably due to his great feats there, as well as being the father of the Hebrew royal bloodline after Jacob. He is portrayed by the Titans, Tatan, in the same manner as others he is descended from. Isaac, Uranus, married Gaia, earth goddess. Son, Jacob, Kronos, god of heavens, married Rhea, the gazer. These names given to the biblical ones were used to signify a priest of the sun, heavens, or the traits one portrayed used over time since Adam and Eve. The Titans were considered adversaries to the Egyptians. Judah, or Jupiter Zeus, married two Pleiades, Maya, eldest are again Maya, and Taiget, who were the daughters of Atlas, Epher, Kittim, Patan, all right, grandson of Abraham, told by Josephus and Pleione, Amazon. His son Zarah, Zeus, married Electra, Roma, a Pleiade, and also a daughter of Atlas. Judah, the lion, and the builder of nations, could for this reason surmise as long being Zeus the Olympian and father of many, as Jacob foretold in his blessing. The reasoning for Sarah as being Zeus is the understanding that Sarah is the father of Dardanus, as well as many others that inhabited the Mediterranean region of ancient times. And you guys get it, that's why they say Dardanus is the son of Zeus, because Zeus is Sarah or Judah or of the line of Judah. It's the same. This is what they're letting you know. They turned them into mythology and into their gods, who are the Greeks. A lot of these so-called Greeks are Israelites. They're Judah and Danites. Check out my Danite videos. Zeus in the Iliad by Homer is said to be by lineage the father of Dardanus. This would make the Phoenician name of Zeus synonymous with the biblical name of Sarah. Both Judah and Sarah would be well known in the ancient region of Greece and Egypt, since they lived there under the pharaohs and were the fathers of many children, as tabulated. The name Zeus, or Sud Pater, Pater meaning father, would be synonymous with a high-ranking, almost worshipped type man. He was looked upon for guidance and security over all the mortal, and in some beliefs immortal offspring. A final important point is that if one explores the language of the word Seut, means akin or bloodline to a common peoples, in this case the Israelites, and Pater meaning highest order or father. Therefore Zeus is the father of the bloodline, as witnessed in ancient times by the Egyptians and the tribes that made up the Mediterranean area. One can explore these facts or pagan beliefs to many depths, but the main reality is the genealogical bloodline has been recorded over time, asserting to the migration of the tribes from Jacob to the Mediterranean area during this time period. This is how they recorded it, through mythology. Sarah marrying Electra, Roma, who is a daughter of Titan Atlas, Epher. Kittim finds the final point in this resolution. Sarah being the father of many and king to Titans would make him the most likely person to be Zeus. A great deal of Babylonian paganism was overlaid onto these historical characters. They added their Babylonian paganism, creating the false gods of the Greek and Roman mythology. Okay, that's a big one right there if you really think about it. A number of royal genealogies based on Homer describe the descent of Trojan royalty as follows: Zeus, Dardanus, Erictonius, Tros, Ilus, Laomedon, Priam. While this lineage might appear mythical, we should note that some ancient myths about the gods were actually rooted in stories about real people. In fact, many pagan religions began in part as ancestral hero worship. Thus, from the line of Zarah came the royal house of David, while from the Sarah line came the royal house of Troy. All right, so we're going to belly flop a little bit to chapter 2. We're still in the book Judah's Scepter, a historical and religious perspective by Brian Arundel of Wardour, Howard. And it says here about Troy, we're going to go to this part right here. It says here, the Trojans were a great alliance of people whose kings descended by birthright of the scarlet thread from Sarah, Zeus, holder of the royal scepter. The foundation that the Trojan people are known for it is the great citadel they built in the same place over centuries' time named Troy, Ilium. Down here it says the founding of the city known as Troy Ilium started with Dardanus, the son of Zarah. According to the ancient Greek story, the Iliad by Homer, Dardanus' grandson Tros was the namesake of the ancient Trojans. So that's where the Tro or Tros is coming from, and of their capital city of Troy. Tros had three sons, Ilus, Ganymede, and Assaracus. The reigning kings of the Trojans were of the line of Ilus. Aeneas, founder of the Roman Empire, was a prince of the royal house of Assaracus. Okay? Do you guys hear that? Who of the Roman Empire was what? A prince of who? Assaracus, who comes from Dardanus, who's a son of Sarah, who's a son of Judah. So who's the so-called Greeks and Romans? There's a big one right there. I know Edomites has a lot to do with it, but a lot of it is some Israelites, becoming so-called Hellenized, right? Christianized, Hellenized. So the famous Aeneas founded the Roman Empire. This book is called Symbols of Our Celto-Saxon Heritage by W.H. Bennett, forward by L.G. Pine. Now, so we continue, says, with these things in mind, let us now turn to that other part of Sarah's descendants which fled out of Egypt, under the leadership of another of Sarah's great-grandsons called Darda. Now remember, he had Calco. Calco eventually was a progenitor of Milesius, the Milesians who ended up in Ireland, married Queen Tefi. He also had another son, as he's saying here, called Darda. We already went over who Darda is, remember? He founded the royal line of Troy. In the authorized version of the Bible, this name is spelled Dara, but in the margin, the alternative spelling is Darda, and the Jewish historian Josephus calls him Dardanus. This is significant because the group which he led went northward across the Mediterranean Sea to the northwest corner of what we now call Asia Minor. There, under the rule of Dardanus, they established a kingdom later called Troy on the southern shore of that narrow body of water which bears his name to this day, Dardanelles. All right, Darda is the founder of the royal line of Troy. Yet Troy is Judah, guys. We went over this in parts 1 and 2. Some more emblems here real quick. Scotland, the red lion. Again, all this is Sarah. Red lion, the unicorn, Ephraim or Israel. The Stuarts, you see that? And then we got the earldom of Fife. So you see the Stuart emblem? Now you know what it means. Remember, Stuart is King James' last name. Some hundreds of years later, this kingdom was destroyed in a war with the Greeks. So-called Greeks, these were Danites they were beefing with. Some of the survivors fled northward into Europe, where their emblem, the rampant red lion, appears in the arms of some of the nations, provinces, and old families in the lands near or bordering the North Sea. Others fled westward across the Mediterranean to Spain and onto the British Isles, where, with some members of the other Israel tribes, they were the first settlers in much of what is now called Scotland. A larger group led by Prince Brutus, right? Again, remember he was a Trojan. And this is the story of Brutus, a direct descendant of Dardanus, okay? He's Judah. He's of the line of Judah through Sarah, through Darda. He is Judah, Brutus, the famous legendary Brutus of England. Yes, he's the line of Judah through Sarah. After living in Italy for a time, also moved on through Spain to Britain, arriving here about the year 1100 BC. Though Britain had a considerable population long before the arrival of these Trojans, their coming and the setting up of this transplanted Trojan kingdom is the actual beginning of the British nation, all right? These are the people who really established the British nation. You see all these Israelites having to do with Judah and Sarah and Pharez. And from that time until the coming of the Saxons into South Britain, so another of Israel's people, the Saxons or the sons of Isaac, eventually invaded the Trojans, these Israelites who had settled from Troy. So yeah, Israelite tribes were beefing amongst each other. This is actual history. So the Saxons came in 1600 years later after the Trojans. A rampant red lion was the emblem of all Britain. With the coming of the Saxons, its use in England as a national emblem was discontinued, being replaced by the emblems brought in by the Saxons and Normans. Nevertheless, in North Britain, Scotland, it is still the chief emblem, as we see in the pictures of the Scottish standards. All right, this is what we're just looking at. All right, guys, so now we're going to move on. We're going to start integrating, another part of the story here that connects it to ancient Britain, right? But first, we're going to go ahead and do a little more correlation. It's going to go into that. All right. Again, hope you guys understand the main idea. When they're saying out of Egypt, they just mean, out of the Exodus. A lot of people coming out of Exodus too, not just Egyptians, not literally Egyptians, but people coming out of the area called Egypt. And they're referred to as Egyptians. But a lot of those were people from the Exodus, Israelites coming out of captivity, coming out of these places they were, right? And ended up in these lands, so-called Grecian lands, Mediterranean regions, whatever, as the royal lines of these people, right? So we're gonna do a little corroboration here, and it says here in this book, missing links discovered in Assyrian tablets. The remarkable discovery of Assyrian tablets that revealed the fate of the long-lost tribes of Israel. All right, that's the book we're getting into. This by E. Raymond, Captain E. Raymond. So I want to go to chapter 4 of this book. Okay, that's where we're going to go to. It says here, pre-captivity migrations of Israel. Long before Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, there had been continuous migrations of Semitic Hebrews to Greece and other parts of Asia Minor and Europe. There are numerous references by the classical writers to the Egyptian origin of the Greeks. Hecatius of Abderi, 6th century BC, quoted by Theodorus Siculus, 50 BC, tells us that the Egyptians expelled all the aliens gathered together in Egypt. The most distinguished of the expelled foreigners followed Danaus and Cadmus into Greece, but the greater number were led by Moses into Judea. Okay, where? Into Judea. So some followed Danaus, or the Danites, Danites. According to Euripides and Strabo, Danaus, having arrived in Argos, made a law that those who had borne the name of Pelasgiotai throughout Greece should be called Danai. Compare this with the acts of the people of Dan. We further learn from Strabo and others that this Argos soon spread its name to the Peloponnesus and afterwards to all Greece. For he says, Homer calls the whole of Greece Argos, for he calls all Argives, as he calls them, Danai. Listen, Danai and Akai. And if you guys remember my Danite videos, I got 3 different ones, guys. And we also did a marathon with them into one video. The Danai, the Akai, these are Danites, guys. Argos is said by the Greeks to have been the birthplace of Hercules, but Herodotus, who went to some trouble to find out who Hercules really was, made a special voyage to Tyre and found an older temple to Hercules. Now, wasn't Hercules Samson? Is Samson a Danite? Uh-oh. The daring adventures and exploits of the Grecian Heracles, is more probably those of semi-traders and buccaneers of Tyre and Dan. In Hebrew, Rakal means to trade, and Heraclean means traders. Those who went forth from Argos and subdued other parts of Greece are spoken as Heraclidi, or descendants of Heracles. In the confusion caused by the Trojan War, apparently the Heraclidi were driven northward out of Peloponnesus. Some years later, when they made a reconquest of the area, they were called the Return of the Descendants of Hercules. History of the Dorians by Mueller. From these descendants of Hercules came the Lacedaemonians, whose capital was Sparta. The Spartans, you see the connection, all right? You guys see the connection. Thus, Agamemnon, who was chosen commander-in-chief of all the Greeks proceeding to the siege of Troy, was king of Argos and Mycene, the Mycenaeans, right? And his brother Menelaus was king of Sparta, capital of Lacedaemon. It is noteworthy that the Lacedaemonians claim descent from Hebrews. It is recorded in 1 Maccabees 12 and Josephus' Antiquities 12, book 4, chapter 10, that about 180 years BC, the king of the Lacedaemonians sent the following letter to the Jews in Jerusalem. Areus, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Onias. This is a historic account, actually, guys. I know about this. The high priest sendeth greetings. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren, and that they are of the stock of Abraham. Now, therefore, since this has come to our knowledge, ye shall do well to write unto us of your prosperity. All right? That's them saying, hey, man, we're brothers, we're the same people. We both come from Abraham. That was the Spartans. All right? The Jews in Jerusalem are reported to have replied as follows: we joyfully received the epistle and were well pleased with Demoteles and Areus, although we did not need such a demonstration because we were well satisfied about it from the sacred writings. All right, and Josephus, that's that book 13, chapter 8. Josephus called attention to the seal upon the letter from Areus. This letter is a four square, and the seal is an eagle with a dragon in its claws. An eagle with a dragon in its claws. Wow, such an emblem can be traced to the tribe of Dan. Guys, hear that? The letter of reply mentions sacred writings. This could refer to Ezekiel 27:19, where Dan is represented in company with Greece, trading to Tyre. Latham, in his Ethnology of Europe, page 157, says that the eponymous of the Argive Danai was no other than that of the Israelite tribe of Dan, okay? That's from that book, Ethnology of Europe, from Latham. I've actually read that, I think, in my Danite videos. Only we are so used to confine ourselves to the soil of Palestine in our consideration of the Israelites that we treat them as if they were ascripti glebai and ignore the share they may have taken in the ordinary history of the world. What a light would be thrown on the origin of the name Peloponnesus and the history of the Pelopete family. All right, you guys hear that? If a bona fide nation of Pelopes, with unequivocal affinities and contemporary annals, had existed on the coast of Asia, who would have hesitated to connect the two? Yet with the Danai and the tribe of Dan, this is the case, and no one connects them. He's saying no one connects them. He's quoting Latham from Ethnology of Europe. He's like, how come people so blind? Duh, Danai, Dan, tribe of Dan, Tuate Danan, tribe of Dan. In Herodotus' time, the story of the Egyptian origin of the Greeks was so well recorded that he did not go into details in his history. However, he did write, if we ascend from Danae, the daughter of Acrisius, we shall find that the ancestors of the Dorian princes were of Egyptian origin, such as the Grecian account of their descent, or coming out of Egypt, not literally Egyptian, but coming out of Egypt. The migrations out of Egypt, like I just said, led by Danaus and Cadmus, right? I'm going to show you who Cadmus is related to, are not the only ones on record. Another important Grecian colony was founded by Cecrops, an Egyptian and Israelite, all right? Is that Calcol, I believe, or Colchis? I forget which one of that. That's Cecrops, all right? All coming from Judah too, who became the first legendary king of Attica, all right? Coming out of Judah as well, guys. I'm going to show you that. G.F. Rodwell, in his Nature volume, it says 6, article, The Birth of Chemistry, says, although much of the Greek learning came direct from Egypt, we cannot trace it to its direct source or point to one Egyptian writer or philosophy. The Greeks, too, received much from the Phoenicians, so-called Phoenicians, right? But here also we find no record. The basis of the edifice of the science of chemistry is sunk deep in eastern soil. The time when the foundation stone was laid is too remote to be even suggested. The enigma expressed in the above extract is solved when we know that the people from whom the learning came were Israelites, all right? Though the geographical source was Egypt. The geographical source, though they were coming out of Egypt, they were Israelites. That's what I've been trying to tell you guys. A migration by sea, says around 1296 BC, according to, them, is indicated when the king of Canaan afflicted Israel, while Dan abode in ships and Asher in his seaports, Judges 5:17. While Dan abode in ships and Asher in his seaports, Judges 5. So apparently, most of the tribe of Dan must have left Palestine prior to the time of Jeroboam II, 1 Chronicles 5:17-26, which would account for them not appearing in this genealogy. Many ancient Greek writers agreed that the Danans came to Argos from Egypt. See Hesiod and then Rasak. Most dates given fall around the first half of the 16th century BC. One early history of Ireland links the Danann or Tuatha De Danann The people of God, invaders of Ulster with the Greek Danaois and Spartans. All right, these are Danites, guys, who, as a roving bands of sea warriors, controlled the Aegean Cretan civilization in the first millennium BC. Later, Irish historians trace part of the tribe of Dan to Ireland as early as the 12th century BC. This would have been after the Exodus when the Israelites were established in Palestine. All right, so you guys know the true old world. So put that all that in reference, right? What they're saying, all this. It says the Danann were not the first Hebrews into Ireland. Okay, and we got all this history in my previous videos, right? Chalco says 1 Chronicles 2:6. Chalco or Chalco of Kings 1:431, founder of the ancient Irish line of kings. Listen, planted a royal dynasty in Ulster. We're going to go over this as well as other royal dynasties in Europe. Chalco coming out of Judah, okay? He and his brother Darda, here we go, guys. I told you, Darda or Dardanus, the founder of Troy, had both migrated from Egypt before the Exodus, before that happened, out of Egypt. They are the sons of Sarah. They are the sons of Sarah. Dardanus, Darda, Dardanus, Darda, the founder of Troy. What? They are the sons of Sarah, okay? Body bag for the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop, all right? We're just talking about the scepter would always be with Judah. These are the founding lines, royal lines. Again, a lot of these so-called Greek nations and European nations. Okay, they are the sons of Sarah. You guys got the whole drop on the line of Sarah, right? On my video series, uh, Israel and the Nations of Europe. All right, check out the first part, at least 3 parts. All right, so it says they are the sons of Sarah, one of the twins of sons of Judah. The Hebrew name Sarah signifies to scatter, and the subsequent history of Sarah and his descendants fully justifies the claim that he was named with prophetic intention, even as was Jacob the supplanter. From Irish folklore, we are told that the first settlers in Ireland were certain Fomorians under Patalon and the sons of Nemed. They came in 2 successive invasions at long intervals and made war one with the other. The sons of Nemed are the heroes and the Fomorians the villains of these tales. Both are described as coming from Greece or Scythia. They are said to have skirted the North African shore. Partolan, the divider, is said to have divided Ireland into 4 parts, while the sons of Nemed are credited with being the builders of stone cromlechs. In due time, the furballs arrived, the men of the leather bags, perhaps in allusion to their bagpipes. A prized possession of the Gauls, they too were said to have come from Greece, having stayed in Spain en route. They are said to have left Greece owing to Greek tyranny. All right, so-called Greek tyranny. Who's the Greek in parentheses? See, maybe Danites, maybe it's other people messing with them. Having been made to carry bags of earth from the fertile valleys to rocky uplands to make tillable land, and so preferring exile to slavery. Memories of Egypt, and asking you, right? They left. All these early arrivals in Ireland appeared to be able to converse with each other in the same tongues. Who are these people of early Ireland? Chaldea. The probable date for these events is between 1400 and 1000 BC, during the Phoenician Golden Age, huh? So-called Phoenicians, huh? Danites and other people, seafarers. Now listen to this, guys. According to the Annals of Ireland, we've gone over this on my older videos, right? Make sure you catch up, guys. According to the Annals of Ireland, this is real. By the 4 masters, the colony called Tuatha de Danann conquered the Furballs and became masters of Ireland. It appears that the Dananns were a highly civilized people, far more skilled in arts and sciences than any of the other colonies that settled in Ireland. They ruled Ireland about 2 centuries, or 197 years, according to the Psalter of Casbel, and were highly skilled in architecture and other arts from their long residence in Greece. All right, long residence where? In so-called Greece, so-called Danites, right? Danites, and intercourse with the Phoenicians. The Dananns ruled about 2 centuries until the arrival of the Milesians. Those are also Israelites right there, guys, which took place 1,000 years before the Christian era. Thus, the date of the arrival of the first colony of the Dananns would be 1200 BC, or 85 years after Deborah and Barak's victory, when we are told Dan had ships. According to the Harmsworth Encyclopedia, Cecrops, right? Calco, that's who Cecrops is right there. I told you, Calco. That's line of Judah, right? The legendary king of Attica, right? Cecrops from the line of Judah. We probably do a video on him specifically, right? Of 1 Chronicles 2:6 and Chalco of 1 Kings 4:31. That's him, Cecrops. And brother of Darda was the mythical founder of Athens. Here we go, another source. And his first king, just like, you know, Theodorus was saying. He was thought to have been the leader of a band of Hebrew colonists from Egypt, the real Egypt, right, to marry from ancient America. Historical records tell of the westward migration of the descendants of Calco along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, establishing Iberian Hebrew trading settlements. Iberian Hebrew trading settlements, trading, right? This is how far back this hustle of, being the merchants, the traders, having ports that the Sephardic Jews inherited. This is how far back it goes, guys. Is what I've been trying to tell you. Settlements, right, in the Iberian Peninsula. One settlement now called Saragossa. Saragossa. In the Ebro Valley in Spain was originally known as Saragossa, meaning the stronghold of Sarah. The stronghold of Sarah, and my last name, guys, goes back to Saragossa, you know, the stronghold of Sarah. From Spain, they continued westward as far as Ireland. The Iberians gave their name to Ireland, calling the island Iberne, which was later abbreviated to Ern and subsequently Latinized to Hibernia, a name that still adheres to Ireland. The descendants of Darda, or Dardanus, or the Danans, same people, look at that, ruled ancient Troy for several hundred years until the city was destroyed in the famous siege of Troy. Descendants of Darda, the son of Sarah, right, of Mahol and Sarah and Judah. Aeneas, right, the last of the royal blood from Sarah and Judah. Look at Aeneas comes from Darda, guys. And this is where Tros comes from Aeneas, which they named Troy after, right? So the last of the royal blood of Sarah and Judah, Aeneas, collected the remnants of his nation and traveled with them to Italy. There he married the daughter of Latinus, king of the Latins, and subsequently founded the great Roman Empire. You see, it had Judah blood. The scepter will always be with Judah, no matter if they become part of the hijack or, whatever, guys. The scepter will always be with Judah. And his grandson Brutus. Here we go. This is what we came to learn, right? This is what I was, the title of the video, and this is what I was getting to after all that we just read, right? We understand who the Trojans were, right? Who Aeneas was, right? So his grandson Brutus, right? His grandson Brutus, with a large party of the Trojans, migrated to the Great White Island. Brutus, an early name for Britain due to its chalk cliffs. Tradition says that on the way to the White Island, Brutus came across 4 other Trojan colonies upon the coast of Spain and persuaded them to join him. All right, so he had other so-called Trojans on his way, right, going around Spain. He's like, hey, come with me. Come to me to the British Isles. That's where he was going, the Great White Island. Listen to this. At Totnes, on the River Dart, 12 miles inland from Torbay, the oldest seaport in South Devon, is a historical stone that commemorates the coming of Brutus to Britain. Listen, this is real. It's not just a legend. Remember, they create legends and they make real people into mythical characters. We read that earlier, right? But these are real histories behind all this, guys. This is a stone there, marks this, commemorates the coming of Brutus from Troy to Britain. Circa, they're saying about 1103 BC, according to their whatever states. The stone is known as the Brutus stone. The tradition being that the Trojan prince set foot upon it when he first landed. The Welsh records state that the 3 tribes of his countrymen received Brutus and his company as brethren and proclaimed Brutus king at a national convention of the whole island. Okay, listen, the Welsh said what? That the 3 tribes of his countrymen received Brutus. The Welsh, remember who the Welsh are described to and who they are as well. We're going to get into that. They received and proclaimed Brutus king. They were the same people, most likely. Tribe of Simeon, Simeon, the tribe of Simeon, the Welsh. All right, we're going to go over that, guys. Remember that. The Trojan prince set upon it when the first landed. The Welsh, again, said, hey, you could be our king. His three sons born after his arrival in Britain were named after the three tribes, Locrinus, Cambert, and Album. Brutus' name heads the roll in all the genealogies of the British kings. Listen, all right? Brutus' name has the role in all the genealogies of the British kings, preserved as faithfully as were those of the kings of Israel and Judah. Okay, this is real history. They try to make people think that this is all mythology. Like these people in the medieval times, they didn't know their genealogies. Like it's just myth. Like they just made it up. This is what they want you to believe, guys. It's real. You see where Brutus is coming from, right? You see how far his, Judah's line descendants ended up. One of them was Brutus, right? The founder of Britain. Okay, the founder of Britain. Continuing, Brutus founded the city of Caer Troia or New Troy. All right, the Romans later called it Londinum, now known as London. Okay, you guys knew that London used to be called New Troy. Why would it be called New Troy if Brutus wasn't coming from Troy? And you know how they keep the names of the places they were coming from when they, found or established colonies somewhere else. He called it New Troy. The Romans called it Londinium. All right, we know it as London. The actual date of the founding of the city is suggested in the Welsh bardic literature. And when Brutus had finished the building of the city and had strengthened it with walls and castles, he consecrated them and made inflexible laws for the governance of such as should dwell there peacefully. And he put protection on the city and granted privilege to it. At this time, Beli, the priest, ruled in Judea, and the Ark of the Covenant was in captivity to the Philistines. The Welsh brutes, says the Welsh brutes. The reference in the quotation above to Beli, the priest, is obviously of Eli, of the first book of Samuel. Such remote prehistorical antiquity of the site of London is confirmed by the numerous archaeological remains found there, not only of the New Stone Age and early Bronze Ages, but even of the Old Stone Age. This indicates that it was already a settlement at the time when Brutus selected it for the site of his new capital of New Troy. All right, Brutus coming from the line of Darda from Troy. That's why he called it New Troy, London, guys. Brutus, come on, that's his line from Judah. There is ample reason to believe that the Trojans, Spartans, Dorians, Lacedaemonians, Achaeans, Minoans, all right, who's the Minoans, right? They had all that copper from Michigan, Danans, and the Palestinian tribe of Dan are all branches of the same central stem branches united from the beginning of a common ancestor, Shem. And then I would say Jacob, right? Isaac, Abraham. Okay? So I just wanted to read that to you guys. You see how we got into Brutus. Brutus is literally a descendant of Aeneas. Aeneas is a descendant of Darda. Okay? The descendants of Darda. From the line of Zarah, right? A line of Judah. A son of Judah, right? Okay, now, so I want to read from this very ancient text, guys. This is a very historical ancient text, according to, British historians and many others, right? This might be a copy of the original right here. Okay, and this is the Historia Britonum. The Historia Britonum, very famous writing of ancient Britain, commonly attributed to Nennius from a manuscript lately discovered in the library of the Vatican Palace at Rome. The Vatican had this manuscript, guys. So a lot of people try to say this is just legend. This is just, or that he didn't write it, or, so they just try to write it off, discredit it. But look where it was, Library of the Vatican Palace at Rome, edited in the 12th century by Mark the Hermit, with an English version, facsimile of the original, notes and illustrations. A facsimile is an exact copy by the Reverend W. Gunn, B.D., rector of Erstead, Norfolk. All right, so even though this was printed in 1819, when we're talking about an old ancient manuscript, right, commonly attributed to Ninus, you got to understand that Ninus, right, or Nemnius or Nemnivus was a Welsh monk of the 9th century, guys. Let's talk about 900 ADs or 800 ADs. He has traditionally been attributed with the authorship of the Historia Britonum, based on the prologue affixed to that work. This attribution is widely considered a secondary 10th century tradition. Ninnius was a student of Evoldugus, commonly identified with the Bishop Elphod of Bangor, who convinced British ecclesiastics to accept the continental dating of Easter, and who died in 809 according to the Annales Cambria. Nennius is believed to have lived in the area made by the Breconshire and Ratnoshire in present-day Powys, Wales. Thus, he lived outside the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, isolated by mountains and a rural society. Because of the lack of evidence concerning the life of Nennius, he has become the subject of legend himself. You see, they try to discredit him. That's what I'm telling you. But it's in all the traditions, guys, of the historical kings of England and all that. Welsh traditions include Nennius, with Elderbook and others said to have escaped the massacres of Welsh monks by Ethelfrith in 613, fleeing to the north, all right? We're talking about even before supposed Middle Ages, we're talking about 800s, Most likely this is a Middle Ages work, though, with the fake chronologies. But either way, we're talking about a very old writing, guys. The Historia Britonum. Historia Britonum in the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? This is where they're saying again the legend of the Arthur, the King Arthur. It says the Historia Britonum, an antiquarian compilation dating from the early 9th century, explains the origin of the kingdom of Gwynedd by relating a tradition that Cuneda migrated from northern Britain to northwestern Wales to expel the Irish who had occupied the area. Okay, that's one. And then again, Nennius Flourish was a Welsh antiquary who between 796 and about 830 compiled or revised the Historia Britonum, or revised. All right, that's from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It says the Historia Britonum has survived in about 35 manuscripts dating from the early 10th to 13th century. Besides the preface, it contains an account of the 6 ages of the world, a description of the inhabitants and invaders of Britain, a section on St. Patrick, a list of 12 victories ascribed to Arthur, some Anglican genealogies, and accounts of 28 cities and various marvels in Britain. The fullest manuscript, British Museum Manuscript Harlan 3859, also contains 2 later interpolations, all right? So the controversy is that maybe Nennius didn't write it, but it's an old writing either way. And that's what we're going to read right now, okay? That's what we're getting into. So in this book, we belly flopped to this part. It says here beginneth the history of the Britons, edited by Mark the Anchorite, a holy bishop of that people. The island of Britain derives its name from Brutus. That's where they get the name Briton, a Roman consul. Remember, Brit, people of the covenant, Brutus, a person of the covenant on the line of Judah, right? But Brutus, a Roman consul, they're saying, taken from the southwest point with something of an occidental bearing to the northern extremity. It measures 800 miles and it is in breadth 200. It contains 33 cities, all right? And here's some of the original. These are the names of the ancient cities of the island of Britain. It has also a vast many promontories and castles innumerable, built of brick and stone. Its inhabitants consist of 4 different people: the Scots, the Picts, the Saxons, and the ancient Britons. 3 considerable islands belong to it. On the south, opposite the Armorican shore, called White, another between Ireland and Britain called Eubonia, or Man, and another directly north beyond the Picts, named Orkney. And hence it was anciently a proverbial, expression in reference to its kings and rulers. He reigned over Britain and its 3 islands. It is fertilized by several rivers which traverse it in all directions, to the east and west, to the south and north, but there are two preeminently distinguished among the rest, the Thames and the Severn, which formerly, like the two arms of Britain, bore the ships employed in the conveyance of the riches acquired by commerce. The Britons were once very populous and exercised extensive dominion by sea, respecting the period when this island became inhabited subsequently to the flood. I have seen two distinct relations. According to the annals of the Roman history, the Britons deduce their origin both from the Greeks and Romans. All right, that's the hijack. Remember, what does that mean? Who are the so-called Greeks? Who are the Romans, right? So remember, we're getting this version from Nennius, right? On the side of the mother, from Lavina, the daughter of Latinus. Okay, so yeah. So on his mom's side, right? We got the Latinus, king of Italy, and of the race of Silvanus, the son of Inachus, the son of Dardanus, right? Dardanus, there we go, Darda, son of Zarah, who was the son of Saturn. Listen, Darda, the son of Saturn, is Israel. Remember that. Saturn is Israel. We're going to see that. King of the Greeks, Israel, Jacob. Darda, the son of Jacob, is Judah. So they just mean of the lineage of so-called Saturn or Israel. King of the Greeks or Jacob. King of the so-called Greeks, huh? Or the so-called Israelites who went and possessed so-called Greek lands, and who, having possessed himself of a part of Asia, listen, built the city of Troy. Dardanus built Troy. Dardanus was the father of Troyes. You see that? Who was the father of Priam and Anchises. Anchises was the father of Aeneas, who was the father of Ascanius and Silvius. And this Silvius was the son of Aeneas and Lavina, the daughter of king of Italy, okay? Aeneas, Brutus, ancestors, right? From the sons of Aeneas and Lavinia descended Romulus. So from this same line comes out Romulus, guys, and Remus, who were the sons of the Holy Queen Rhea and the founders of Rome. So Brutus was consul when he conquered Spain and reduced that country to a Roman province. He afterwards subdued the island of Britain, whose inhabitants were the descendants of the Romans from Silvius Posthumus, thus named because born after the death of his father Aeneas, his mother Lavina, having concealed herself during her pregnancy, and having been born in a wood, was denominated Silvius, and hence the Roman kings are called Sylvan. But the Britons are those who sprang from the family of Brutus, okay? Brutus, the Britons, Brutus, Aeneas, after the Trojan War, arrived with his son in Italy. All right, that was his dad, Aeneas, the descendant of Darda, right? And having vanquished Turnus, married Lavina, the daughter of King Latinus, who was the son of Faunus, the son of Picus, the son of Saturn. After the death of Latinus, Aeneas obtained the kingdom of the Romans, and Lavina brought forth a son, who was named Silvius. Ascanius founded Alba, and afterward married. His wife Lavina became pregnant, and Aeneas, being informed of it, ordered his son to consult a magician to determine whether the child conceived were male or female. The magician pronounced it to be a son, who should become the most valiant among the Italians, and the most beloved of all men. In consequence of this prediction, the magician was put to death by Ascanius, but it happened that the mother of the child, dying at his birth, he was named Brutus. All right? And after a certain interval, agreeably to what the magician had foretold, he displayed such superiority among his play fellows that they seemed to consider him as their chief. He was from envy expelled from Italy, and came to the island of the Tyrrhene Sea, when he was exiled on account of the death of Turnus, slain by Aeneas. He then went among the Gauls and built the city of Tours, otherwise called Tournus. At length he came to this island, named from him Britannia, dwelt there, and filled it with his own descendants, and it has been inhabited from that time to the present period. Aeneas reigned over the Latins 3 years, Ascanius 33 years, after whom Silvius reigned 12 years, and Postumus 39 years, the latter from whom the kings of Alba are called Sylvan, and brother to Brutus, who governed Britain. At the time, Eli the high priest judged Israel, and when the Ark of the Covenant was taken by a foreign people. Wow, so you guys can have a reference. All right. And then it continues, guys, in the next paragraph and talks about who came after these Britons or Brutus. It says, after an interval of not less than 800 years come the Picts. So you see that the Britons were there before the Picts. The Picts, even though they were in Ireland, Scotland, other parts a little longer. But you see all these different people coming in, right? And this is, again, according to somebody who lived in the supposed 800 ADs, guys. Primary source telling you the history of the name of Britain and where he was coming from. He's from Troy, right? From the Trojans, Darda or Dardanus, okay? And to corroborate a little, we got this book here. It says a history of the kings of ancient Britain, from Brutus to Cadwallader, abridged from the Collectanea Cambrica, with notes by Manly Pope, okay, from 1862. Says here, the Chronicles of the Kings of Britain, book the first, history of Brutus. After the destruction of Troy, okay, Aeneas Whiteshield and his son Ascanius, whose mother was Crusa, the daughter of Priam, king of the Trojans, fled by sea to Italy with a fleet of 28 ships, accompanied by people of either sex and all ages, to the number of 88,000. Latinus, who was at that time king, having described the strangers, dispatched a messenger to ascertain who and what they were. Latinus, being satisfied with the reply, at once consented that they might land and purchase necessary conditionally, that no ill usage should be offered to the inhabitants. Latinus then invited Aeneas and a few of his friends to an entertainment at his castle, and it was here that Aeneas saw Lavinia, daughter of Latinus. Remember Aeneas, a descendant of Darda and Tros, whose beauty was allowed to the unrivaled, and which so captivated Aeneas that he solicited from her father the honor of making her his wife in dower. Upon Aeneas being informed that Lavinia was the betrothed of Turnus, king of the Rutulians, he requested that Latinus would permit the affair to be settled between Turnus and himself, to which Latinus, who was favorably disposed toward Aeneas, willingly consented. Turnus, hearing what had passed, at once commenced hostilities against Latinus, who soon found a ready auxiliary in Aeneas. When the two armies were in sight of each other, Turnus sent a challenge to Aeneas to decide the contest in single combat, and they alone were immediately concerned with Lavinia espoused the conqueror. Aeneas accepted the challenge with great joy, and they fought till their spears were shivered to atoms, their swords broken at the hilts, and it then became a contest of body to body. But as God is the arbiter of events, Aeneas slew Turnus, received the pledges of allegiance from the army of Turnus, seized himself of his estates, and married Lavinia. For 5 years Latinus and Aeneas reigned conjointly. When the former dying, Aeneas succeeded to the whole sovereignty, but built a city which he called Lavinium, and reigning but 4 years after Latinus died, was succeeded by his son Silvius. Lavinia, upon the loss of her husband, founded herself unequal to the government of the country, and her son, being a minor, was transferred as a ward to Ascanius, who was invested with regency until Silvius should be of age. Ascanius conducted himself toward Lavinia with the most filial devotion, and building a city on the Tiber, which he called Alba Longa, he transferred thither the heathen gods of Lavinium, but the gods, however, returned to Lavinium by night and were once again sent back to Alba Longa. Now Ascanius had a son named Silvius, whom he sent so soon as he was able to walk to Lavinia's palace for his education. Subsequently, this son of Ascanius brought himself into disgrace, and when the diviners were consulted, they replied that the son of Silvius would be the death of his father and mother, and afterwards attain to sovereign power. Nor were they mistaken. After a reign of 33 years, Ascanius died, bequeathing the sovereignty of Italy to his brother Silvius, who, not unmindfully of the nephew that bore his name, shared with him a considerable portion of his dominions. When Silvius the nephew had a son, The mother was lost during her travail. The child was put to nurse and called Brutus, who, when he had attained the age of 15 years, being then on a visit to his father, it was proposed that they should attend a stag hunt in the forest. A large deer being suddenly roused, a young man shot at it with an arrow, which, glancing from the back of the animal, pierced his father's breast, and he died upon the spot. And thus was he the death of his father and mother. The Roman sages now decided that as Brutus was the cause of his father's death, although unintentionally, he must be banished from their country. All right, you guys hear what's going on? Upon hearing this verdict, Brutus, without loss of time, departed for Greece, and there he became acquainted with the posterity of Helenus, Priam's son, who were at that time in a state of bondage under Pandrasus, a king of Greece. All right, guys, so this actually goes into very much detail of his whole story of Brutus, the legend, right? And what happened before he got to Britain on his travels there, who he was fighting with, who was he hooking up with, who was following him, what was going on, so many things, right? On his way to Iberian Peninsula, what he did there, and all that, and then how he had having visions of how he had to go to this island, this white island, and all that. You know, this is all the legends, right? What they're calling that was England, right? So we get to a part right here. It says the country they came to was Albion, that is in Welsh. Iwenins, the White Island, at that time uninhabited, save by a few giants. There was just a few giants in England, right? Or the British Isles, right? It says here Brutus, 1074 BC. Upon exploring the country, Brutus and his followers were well pleased with everything they saw, and then began to build houses and cultivate the soil, which gave the island an appearance of having been long inhabited. Brutus dedicated a temple to the goddess Diana, but whilst engaged in his devotions was attacked by a party of giants, all of whom he slew except Gog Magog. Listen, Gog, the son of Japhet, right? Who was spared in order that he might wrestle with Corinius. Brutus had named the island after himself as Britain and called his people Britons. Okay, this isn't their history, guys. Corinius, he had settled in Cornwall, and it was here that the contest and wrestling took place. As soon as Corinius saw the monster advancing, he at once laid aside his armor and prepared to engage with him. The giant now seized his enemy round the middle, and with a hug broke 3 of his ribs. This so enraged Corinius that, summoning all his strength, he pressed him so that he became livid. Then, raising him on his shoulder, carried him to a rock overhanging the sea, cast him down the precipice, and dashed to pieces. He fell into the water. To this day, it's called Gog Magog's, or the Giant's Leap. All right, guys, you hear the background behind that? Brutus now thought of building a city, and journeying along the coast, he came to the Thames, whereon he found a suitable spot and gave it to the name of Troia, Neuwit, or New Troy, okay? New Troy. Brutus named it after his old city where he was coming from, right? New Troy. That is London, guys. A name it long retained. That's what it was called, London. A name it long retained until corrupted into Troinovant, and afterwards changed into Caer Lut, or Lut's town. Lut's son of Beli, the great brother to Caswallon, Hasibelon. There was also a son of Shem who was Lut too, guys. So Lut's town eventually became son of Beli, the great brother of Caswallon, Casibelon, who opposed Julius Caesar. Lut fortified the place strongly with walls and towers, but the changing of the name and abolishing that of Troy caused a disagreement between Lut and his brother Ninian, and at last it was called London by the Saxons. When Brutus had finished the city, he instituted certain laws which were to be observed by the inhabitants for the administration of justice and the preservation of peace. Okay, Brutus, New Troy, London, Britain. All right, this is the real history, guys. This is from their own historical annals and records in Britain, in Ireland, in Scotland, and Wales, right? It's all part of their oral historical traditions, old ancient records, old stories. old genealogies, okay? All right, guys. So, I hope you guys understand basically the whole story, the whole background to Brutus, his whole connection to Troy and the Trojans. Who are the so-called Trojans? They get their name from Trus, right? Ancestors of Aeneas and Darda, right? Sorry, descendants of Darda, who is of the line of Zarah, right? A son of Judah. That's how it all connects. Wanted to show you guys this book before I go. I'm not gonna read from it. You guys let me know in the comments if you want me to do another part and just read from this book. If you like, just let me know. This is from Anthony Adolph. It says Brutus of Troy and the quest for the ancestry of the British. All right, so go ahead and check this one out because it seems like all the information we just went over is kind of in there, summarized a little bit. Obviously, not the whole biblical connection. I don't know if he gets into that. So we shall, if you guys want, let me know in the comment section if enough for you want me to go ahead and get into this book as well. I will be sharing it on my Patreon either way, all these books, right? For the appreciation to my Patreons. And we have reached the end of today's presentation, guys. I hope it was enough information. If you do a background and verify all this information, you will see that I used literally the sources they got. The only one I didn't go through is Geoffrey of Monmouth's. Basically, he gets it from Nemesis, Historia Britonum. I went to the actual source, so I just skipped him a little bit. But he basically tells about this Brutus coming into being the founder of Britain and coming from Troy as well, Geoffrey of Monmouth, okay, from the Middle Ages, okay? Other than that, I showed you almost everything that is to be known, when it comes to this connection here and what sources people kind of use, okay? I hope you enjoyed it. I really did. And I see a deep connection here, and I see that the prophecy that the scepter will always be with Judah, Most High always made sure that his line was always the ruling people, through Judah, okay? And, we have lived, grown up in a whitewashed history, whitewashed world of the past. So now we're just correcting it, okay? And understanding a little better. This may connect to you in some way. Remember what happened to the people in Europe and how they ended up in the Americas. All right? I'll leave it with that note. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa.